Okay, so you mentioned all the different trading that happens out there, and one of the things you just dropped quickly was Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin is the one thing recently that's been on the top front headline news that probably has a little bit in common with what we want to talk about today. What is the foundation of Bitcoin, and how can we apply some of that to the trucking industry?
Well, so it's interesting. The framework of Bitcoin, the technology behind Bitcoin is blockchain, and blockchain is a technology framework that enables Bitcoin to operate. So it's basically for lack of a better description, it's the operating system as which it's a description of the types of operating systems that Bitcoin actually operates. Because Bitcoin is not a physical good. It's not something that you can hold in your hand. It is a currency that is nothing more than computer code that transfers value, and it's built upon this concept that is known as blockchain. And blockchain is the technology framework which has enabled cryptocurrencies to be created, and it's essentially what blockchain represents is this idea that you had this information that no one owns, that no one controls, and is distributed throughout an entire group of people that are attached to this network. And it's a little hard to explain just in terms of that, because it's kind of theoretical. It's hard to get your head around because it's not tangible. But blockchain is, in many ways, in the transportation industry, has been described as a technology that will have the same impact that the internet had on digital media, that blockchain will have the impact on the freight industry and logistics industry. So it is an exciting technology, and we're certainly invested in the interest of it.
Awesome. Well, how does that play into the futures trading of transportation? Because that's how we kind of got around to using that. What can we use it for? Can you explain? I think where people are confused on the whole concept, because it's, as you said, it's just a theory right now. How does it work? It's not a tangible thing. So can you explain how a transaction would work using blockchain?
Yeah, so I want to separate futures, which is a business that I'm involved in, and trading futures, which I don't want to get too deep into it because it's completely different than blockchain. So we, by way of coming to create our futures market, we hired a bunch of payments and folks that came from Wall Street, because that's what you do when you're creating a tradable market. And blockchain has kind of taken force over the last 5 years into Wall Street and into big banks. Have tried to explore cryptocurrencies and other types of transactions, and so we just happen to have kind of the right sauce of having trucking executives and trucking people on our team, and payments people and Wall Street people all together. And so when you start looking at standardized contracts and standardized what futures markets are, trading standardized contracts, you end up creating this kind of a soup of knowledge in terms of how people are thinking about things. And we started looking at blockchain because it became very apparent that it's impossible to create a futures market where a truck shows up. In other words, in a futures market, the way to think of it is I'm buying something at a price today for delivery of something in the future. And that's what a futures contract does. Right. The problem is when you get into trucking, no two loads are the same. And one customer has a service requirement of it has to be within a 15-minute window, and another customer says you can pick it up and deliver it. It's a drop trailer, and you can deliver it whenever. And so all these loads are very different. It's very hard to do that. So we realized we couldn't actually accomplish that, and we decided that wasn't a route. But we kept looking at blockchain because we were intrigued by the idea that through information and trading of information, you could actually create a whole new transportation system that could solve the issues that plague our industry. A lot of stuff. And blockchain could create a self-regulating market, could create an environment where the industry itself regulates its own outcome and doesn't need the government. It doesn't need regulators to decide the outcome for the industry, because it could endorse and embrace this technology and the regulators themselves don't actually have to do that. And so that was what really intrigued us was, could you take this technology and empower the industry where the smallest trucker, a one-person operator, would be playing equal to the largest players in the market, because they'd have the ability to compete where, data care. It doesn't matter whether there's your truck says JB Hunt on the side or says Jim Bob Trucking, if you're dealing with a piece of code, because it's in blockchain. It's about, I am programming this contract to do something, and once it does something, then I will do this. It will be an outcome, and the contract itself, the blockchain would know that took place, and would reward the person that did it. It doesn't matter if it's JB Hunt or US Express or Jim Bob Trucking, because it's all equal. And that's what makes blockchain so powerful, is that you can now solve so many issues that regulators have been trying to solve through government regulations. It can actually empower the industry. So that's what makes it so exciting, is that it's the first time we've had in our industry, and I've grown up in it, and I love this industry, and I love the power of the industry, what it does and what it means for everybody. But I also recognize there's tons of challenges. Trucking's a tough life for so many people, but it's so necessary. And this is an opportunity to potentially change that.
Okay, well, let's focus on the small carrier. You said Jim Bob's Trucking. So the small 1, 2, 10,
Yep.
maybe 20 truck carrier, how will this technology benefit them, and what can they do to take advantage of this?
Well, a great question. So I think that's where a lot of the power is. If you think of trucking companies and how small operators don't have a lot of leverage in the market. So they're pretty much living load to load. Maybe if you got a couple of relationships out there, you're able to kind of get freight on a consistent basis from these shippers. But the problem is they're kind of subject to the overall market. And even the largest carriers, it's true of them, they just have a lot more resources available to them and leverage in the market that kind of insulates them from the broader trends. But when you're operating in the spot market and you're taking loads from load boards and brokers, you have very little control of the outcome, and you have very little leverage in the transaction. So things like detention, you get stuck at a shipper for 4 hours, more than you're allotted to, and you're there for 6 hours. How are you going to get paid detention? Well, your ability to collect on that is only as good as the person that's paying the bill. So if the broker says, "Screw you, I'm not going to pay detention," you're out, and you have no recourse. And so those are the types of problems that blockchain could actually solve for, because through blockchain technology, you can actually code it. The contract itself could be coded that the moment the driver is detained, the moment the driver hits the dock, it records what time he's in, and then what time he leaves, and all of the processes required for notifications can actually be automated and doesn't require the driver to be involved. And now Jim Bob Trucker is operating on the same playing field as the larger guys in terms of having consistency in those business practices. So he can collect detention and will get paid detention, and if it's built properly, could be paid the moment that the load is detained. And that's what makes the technology powerful. The other thing is, look at how much money companies spend on factoring services each year. And the reason they spend money on factors, they want to get their money now, and they don't want to deal with the process of having to, they don't know if it's 30 days or 45 days or whatever. So they take the factoring relationships, so take quick pay, and that's quite expensive. You're talking about loans that are 18 to 60% just in terms of like an annual APR.
Right.
That's a lot of money that blockchain could solve for.
Absolutely. So I know blockchain is just getting their toes in the water in the market. I know the first gathering, so to speak, was back in November in Atlanta, and you have another gathering coming up in May again this year?
Yeah, so Transparency 18 is on May 21st, and that's so when we launched FreightWaves, we started writing a lot of articles about blockchain, and out of it, we started having a lot of conversation. We actually get a lot of phone calls from companies in the space that are saying, "Hey, help me figure out this blockchain thing. You guys kind of understand it better than anybody out there." And what we realized is that companies all over trucking, whether they're technology companies, trucking, carriers, shippers, brokers, whatever, were asking for direction on blockchain because they're seeing this technology kind of come about. And we realized that what the technology could do and how powerful it is in terms of leveling the playing field and changing the way the industry operates, that we started to create an alliance of companies. And we created BITA, which is the Blockchain and Transport Alliance, which is now the largest blockchain alliance in the world of any industry. And it's meant to help create standards so that the industry can have common standards that everybody's playing on an equal playing field. And it's meant to bring companies together to solve for these things. And so we have single operator truck operators as members, and then we have the largest carriers in the country. And so it ranges from small to big, and it's meant to really serve as a self-regulating body. It's meant to encourage the industry itself to regulate the outcomes and not depend on a government regulator to do so.
Well, you've brought that up twice now. I think everybody can get on board when it comes to less government intrusion into what we're doing, right? So now one of the things
I'm a diehard libertarian, which is why I laugh when people think I'm liberal. I don't think we need the government in our lives. We need less of it. So.
Absolutely. Now, one thing that you've said a couple times here, it's a buzzword in this industry, I'm sure you know that, is the whole idea of a level playing field. Is a level playing field really the best thing for everybody, in your opinion?
Well, no. And the big carriers, you look at the ELD mandate. The ELD mandate is ultimately an economic update, because if we want to talk safety, and we can argue about whether you need ELDs or not, the argument should be about the hours of service itself. It shouldn't be about the ELDs. All the ELDs do is ensure compliance, is effectively what they're meant to do. The problem is the hours of service themselves are built in a bizarre way by some government set of bureaucrats that have taken all of the driver's autonomy and ability to make decisions away from him, and are creating a tracking system to ensure he's complying with these ridiculous rules. And that's all the discussions about this anti-ELD, when actually the discussion should be about the hours of service and whether or not we need to change the hours of service, which is why I really love what Keep Trucking came out with in terms of their dispute. So those things are important discussions. And we talk about leveling the playing field. You have to understand that 80% of transactions, there's almost no difference between an orange truck, a red truck, a white truck, and blue truck that show up. There's very little differentiation between those, the different carriers that are there. Jim Bob or Warner, there's very little difference.
Right.
And on the vast majority of these transactions. Yet there is a clear delineation between the leverage that the big guys have versus the small guys. And the small guys have very little control of the outcome. And I think what blockchain potentially can do is give the power to people to make decisions, because everything is transparent. And it's all blockchain does at the end of the day is provide a level of transparency. So if I take a load, if I'm a driver, if I'm an independent driver, and I have a choice between two loads, one that pays $1,000 and is paying, I know that I'm going to get paid detention. I know that I'm going to get paid upon delivery. I know that I get paid immediately. And another pays $1,100, but I don't know if I'm going to get paid detention. I don't know if I'm going to get paid upon delivery. Then I'm more likely to get the sure thing, $1,000, because then if I get detained, at least I'm getting paid for it. And the problem is right now is all of that information is opaque to the guy making the decision, the driver. So he doesn't know when he takes a load if that $1,000 load is a good load or the $1,100 is the better load, because there's not enough information. and I don't know the intention of the other party. Does the broker intend to pay me attention? Is the broker going to pay me up front? And yes, there are services that I can subscribe to find that information out, but why can't I have control of that? That's what this technology can potentially do for people. And so, now it's not to suggest that there aren't things that will be constructed that the big carriers will have certain inherent advantages to, because they're able to take different types of freight that maybe are not open to everybody. But those issues always existed. All this does is it makes the market much more transparent than the way it operated before.
And there has always been a huge cry for transparency. Brokers taking too much off the top, or shippers not paying enough, or the carrier thinks they're getting screwed over because somebody's paying more and they're not passing it down the chain. And, so the transparency thing, I think, is something that everyone would get on board with. I think there's a big call for that. I'm going to throw this out. We are streaming on Facebook and YouTube. We're also live on Blog Talk Radio. If you're watching one of the video streams, call the number at the bottom of the screen, 917-889-9924. We have several callers on the line already. If you're on the line, go ahead and press number 1 on your keypad to raise your hand. If you have any questions or comments, anything you'd like to ask Craig, he is open for discussion tonight. And the show is all his tonight. And I see a lot of questions and comments coming in on Facebook and YouTube as well. We'll see if we can get to some of those toward the end of the show, but I think we'll take the calls off the phone lines first. So call in, 917-889-9924. And again, if you're streaming this while you're driving tonight, please call the number. You can turn the video off, 917-889-9924. It's much safer to just listen to this over the phone line. You can easily hit the button and hit number 1, get your questions and comments in, and it's a lot safer than trying to watch the video. I wouldn't want anybody getting in any issues out there on the road trying to listen in on the video streams that we've got going on. So we have several calls on. Elizabeth is in the other room screening now, and once she gets a few calls screened here, we'll get these on. Are you ready for some questions, Craig? I've got one now that might fit.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, we're going to go to Rusty in Arizona. Welcome to the show, Rusty.
Hey, thanks for taking my call, guys. Hey, you had mentioned that ELDs enforce compliance. I have yet to find a single owner-operator that will allow me to access his IP and his cell phone record to verify that, because I don't find any owner-operators that have an ELD that are logging their every single phone call, text message, anything that has to do with the business, I believe has to be logged. And so that's not being done, especially their billing and checking out load boards. So ELDs will never make a guy compliant if he doesn't want to be. And it's very hard to do that when the ELD is mounted in the truck. So that's one point that I see that it's not going to change. And the second is that Convoy is already doing exactly what you're talking about. They tell you they're going to give you $40 an hour for wait time after 2 hours, so long as you're there on time. They use the geofences to verify that you're there on time. They pay you within 24 hours, so long as you have your GPS enabled the whole time that you're on the load. All this stuff is already being done, and I never want a level playing field because I can outscale just about anybody. I don't know anybody else out there can put 53,000 on a flatbed or 49,000 on a drive-in. So there's nobody who can play with me, and I don't want to be level. I mean, if I want to be union, I'd go be a union guy. So,
so let me go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I agree with everything you said. I don't actually disagree with anything you said. And when it comes to compliance, you're absolutely right. There's nothing in the technology itself that forces compliance. That was how it was sold to, sold through Congress and the FMCSA and to the public, is that this would force compliance. And that was the intention, the spirit of the ELD mandate. But you're right. There are a ton of ways to get around the technology, which I won't dive into right now. And there are tons of ways that the technology itself does not actually create the outcome that people were looking for. So no disagreement there. Second thing about Convoy, absolutely, you're right. In fact, Convoy is an active member of BETA, was one of the founding members of BETA. and is looking at the technology to help improve the experiences that you already experience with Convoy. They're just looking to accelerate the experiences and provide more value so they can continue to build and grow their business. We had a conversation with the co-founder of Convoy today. Go ahead.
They're just racing to the bottom. So if you can read, write, and speak English, that's the context of getting a CDL. And they are, if you don't speak English, you can press number 2. So if you can't speak English well enough to get a load, don't worry, they'll take care of that for you. So, I mean, it's a race to the bottom. They're enabling those who are not legal drivers by doing that, as well as I've seen the rates on loads. And, I mean, we were getting paid $400 for a little crosstown load 2.5 months ago, and now they're down to $160 a load on Convoy. So it's just a race to the bottom for them. I mean, and there are a few good paying loads that I've been taking from them, but I mean, $40 an hour, there's no negotiating on that, you know, and so if and when they do get loads that are out of the ordinary, you can't negotiate. And that's the problem with the electronics and just having a person. Now, if you can talk to somebody like you call into most other brokers, they can understand that you can read, write, and speak English. You can build value in the fact that you're going to show up in, you know, the proper PPE or, you know, company uniform and other things like that you just can't do with technology. So it just streamlines things and makes things easier. I get that, but.
Well, but so a couple of things. One is there's the great thing about a market and capital market, you know, capitalism is there's nobody forcing you to do anything to take a load from Convoy. And if you are not able to make money on a load from Convoy or a load from C.H. Robinson or a load from Walmart, you shouldn't have to take that load. There's nothing in any of this that mandates you take loads from one company. And the great thing about technology is that it's enabled you as an owner operator. Are you an owner operator? Are you a company driver? Or?
He's an owner operator with his own authority, his own carrier. I did put him back on hold so we can get another question on here.
Okay. It doesn't. You're not required to do anything. And what's great about it is that you, because of technology, you now have access to more loads than you've ever had. And if you think that Convoy is not paying you a market rate and you can get a better rate from somewhere else, you can easily go to that other broker, that other shipper. And that's what's great about what's happening right now with all this digital technology. But having said that, there's also a lot of waste that goes into these business practices that people like Convoy and people like, you know, the brokers, not only do they take a significant piece, but they also have a significant amount of cost behind it. And for them, if they can operate more efficiently and eliminate a lot of that back-end manual processes, then they can actually pass more money on to the drivers.
Well, what companies, I mean, I didn't realize Convoy was already a part of this. What other companies are out there? I know you've mentioned it to me before. There's some big players in this game already.
Yeah, absolutely. So we think about 40% of the U.S. freight market is actually represented in the members. So if you go to bita.studio, BITA.studio, and you click on the members page, you can actually see all of the companies that are members of Bita. And you know, I don't know that we want to go through all of them.
Oh, of course not, yeah.
You know, C.H. Robinson is in there, Echo's in there, YRC's in there, J.D. Hunt's in there, Schneider's in there. You know, you have, you know, there's a number of names, the Global Trans, Tadmore. Tadmore is a 4-person brokerage operation, and yet, you know, the founder is incredibly passionate about what blockchain could do for his business, knowing that it potentially could change their entire business model. So I think what ultimately happens when you create this technology is it should provide more value to the driver, that all that back-end cost becomes more transparent and gives you more power to move to a broker if they're not treating you right. If Convoy's not treating you right, in your opinion, and you think another broker, Coyote's treating you better, you could easily go and haul a load for Coyote.
Right. No, but you're saying that 40% of the marketplace is already represented here. So going forward, you know, we're looking at the majority of the industry will be on this type of a system.
Yeah, we think about 40 when we've added up the the freight revenues of the members, and it ranges as big as UPS and FedEx and BNSF joined today to these small, very small one-person or two-person freight brokers. It is across the landscape. Landstar is a member, as an example, that is certainly has a reputation for being really focused on owner-operators and their independent operator model. And so it ranges from all sorts of business models. It's not about one business model.
Well, let me give you my take on it. I've kind of just let you have the floor on this. My take on it is you are capitalizing on the commodity market of trucks. But the biggest and best fit for this is the commodity freight as well. So the dock-to-dock stuff that the mega carriers are already handling, they'll be the first ones on this system. And a lot of that currently, now Rusty was it seemed a little, I don't know, off put by the theory of this, but right now a lot of the small carriers don't have access to some of that freight at all, except through some brokers that may or may not be given the carrier the benefit of the doubt on some of these transactions. So this will give us transparency and access as small carriers, but you still have 50 to 60% of the market that is not really participating in this, at least not yet. And we'll still have access to go outside of the market. And he elaborated about his niche, about being able to scale more than other trucks, and he sets himself apart. So the niche will still be there. But the commodity market already exists, but it's dominated primarily by these mega fleets and mega brokers, and the small guys can't even get their foot in the door in most cases. This will give us an opportunity. Is that kind of the gist of it?
Yeah, I think yes, that's certainly true. But it's also, we're working with the Department of Defense for tracking nukes, as an example.
Wow.
Or one of our partners is. And so that's not real commoditized. And the reason is that the ability to track is very important. So I think you'll see it in food. If you haul food and food products, because the FDA mandate, that is an example where people want to know where their food is at all time. Now, we've talked about payments and getting paid and tendering loads, but blockchain is not about one use case. It's not about taking commoditized freight. It can very well be about tracking. It's all about information and having all of the information available to people. It can be, there's so many things you can do with the technology itself. So, yes, absolutely, the commoditized stuff is quite easy to bring up to it. But the power of it is in these disparate, high value, specialized things where you actually need a level of screening and security to it. I need to know more about the truck before it shows up as to who's taking that load and where they are at all times. And there's an element of that and so forth. And if I'm buying a used truck, I want to know what's the maintenance record history of that truck. And I want to know that has that truck been in an accident before I go buy it. Well, today I either go to these services that provide the history, or in the future I'll actually be able to know that through the blockchain.
So it's not just on freight trades; it's about everything. It's everything being tracked. Every transaction out there will be tracked.
So you can find out. If you want to know loading times before you take a load from a shipper that you've never done business with, do you want to know how long you're going to sit? Eventually, through this technology, you will have information about how long that shipper is going to detain you. When you get a load, you can make the decision that shipper is going to hold me 7.5 hours because that's what they did over the last 3 months. Their average wait time 7.5 hours. I better get paid attention, or my price has gone from $1,100 to $1,300. I'm happy to take that load, but I want to know before I get there that I'm not going to have to deal with this shipper who's inefficient.
Another thing I think that we're missing here is this is not really a standalone system. Rusty was talking about Convoy. You said Convoy is part of this. This technology is technology that other companies can overlay and take a part of. So this is not like I think he was comparing, blockchain to Convoy, but it's not two separate things. Blockchain can be a part of everybody's business. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. Well, it's like comparing a mobile phone or the app store or the internet to Facebook. So it's like comparing internet and Facebook and saying Convoy. In the case of Facebook and the internet, Convoy is Facebook, and the internet is this entire structure. So when we talk about Convoy, it's one company using the technology. Convoy is not your cell phone. It's not your iPhone or your Google Android phone. It is an app that lives inside that phone that connects to a company known as Convoy. That app can be deleted at any moment in time. Your interaction with it is the architecture they built into that. But when we talk about blockchain, it is a piece of the action. So when I talk about Convoy being a part of BITA, it means that they're thinking about their businesses to help their business be operating more efficient. And frankly, if you have trucks right now, you're kind of setting your own price. So for them, they need to drive costs out of all those back-end transactions and deliver more value. So that's correct. You can't compare blockchain. To compare blockchain to Convoy is actually not correct because they're not competitive products.
Right.
And for the record, BITA is not a product. It's an association of companies.
Well, let's talk about that.
Blockchain.
We've been talking about blockchain, but then you just threw out BITA. I don't think we even elaborated. That's Blockchain and Transport Alliance. So it's a group coming together to form the blockchain, to form the model that we can use blockchain in transportation. So right now, the whole.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So it's like 1992 when all of these universities and companies came together to create the internet, to create what we know now as the internet. And they came up with the structure of the internet, which are IP addresses, in 1992. They made the rules on how those work. And then what came out of that is this thing we now know as the internet that we don't even think about. It just exists. And that's exactly what's happening with BITA and blockchain, is that companies are coming together that have very sometimes competing interests and disparate interests, and are saying, we want to work together. We want to solve this problem. We want to solve driver turnover by rewarding drivers with more money, because the problem is that it's all paid at the mean. So the problem is the really high quality drivers are not being paid enough because the really bad, all the money is going to hire some of the really bad drivers. And I'm having to constantly hire those same drivers and give them more money when I should be putting more money in the hands of drivers that are really high quality. Why does a driver who's been driving in the company being paid maybe on a scale that's, maybe gets scaled up, but he's not getting he's not able to make as much money because it's all generic in nature. And so what I'm saying is that these companies are coming together to BITA to kind of create the future of this technology. And it's not like BITA's competing against Convoy or C.H. Robinson. They're actually using the technology in their own businesses to solve problems to be more efficient. And to your point about race to the bottom, I think in broker margins, it is difficult, and there's a competitive environment that's causing them to lose a lot of their ability to negotiate, because it's just so much competition out there. And I think what they're having to do is say, okay, we have to operate more efficiently. We have to bring more value to the market, because if we don't, we're not going to be around very long.
And I think that is where people are afraid of this technology. I think they think this is coming in as another product, in place of, it'll just take the place of the brokers. It'll take the place of the load boards, and it's just another service out there. But it's really just an overlay for everybody to use within their own business. So there will still be brokers, there will still be salespeople, you'll still be building relationships, but the transaction itself will be conducted through this new, I don't know what you want to call it, a portal, the new internet of trucking.
Well, no, it's a framework. It's not even
there you go.
It's not a portal. It's a framework. So nobody will ever buy a product from BITA. So nobody that ever drives a truck will ever get a load from BITA. The relationships that you've built will continue to exist and hopefully thrive. And brokers will thrive. It's just that the business model of which I have all of the information and all of my ability to do business is entirely based. Go back to buying an airline ticket in the 1990s. Before we had the internet, people would have call up their travel agent, and the travel agent would pick the flight, and it was a slow process. And the internet came along, and now I can make all of my decisions. I have everything right in front of me, and I don't have to depend on anything. It didn't destroy travel agent, the industry. In fact, Travelocity and Expedia and Orbitz are massive companies. It just changed how those relationships are made, and it made the person on the other end gave them a lot more power in the outcome because they had all the information. It's not hoarded, and I think what we'll see is the future. You mentioned the load board, the DAT, and we actually have a number of load boards that are actually a part of the network of BITA.
I saw
the
that
DAT
on
is
your
an example
of
an organization that's part of a BITA. Yeah.
Yeah, all the load boards, several of the carriers, brokers, including most of these new up-and-coming companies that have their own app-based programs. They all seem to be members, and your membership is growing fast. I'm impressed. And even some of the people that are, you mentioned Tadmor. Pete Emmenheiser is. Most of the people that are listening to this show probably recognize who that is. Tadmor Transportation. He's got a pretty good reputation for being one of the better brokers out there, fair with the drivers, and transparent and easy to work with. And even he went to your event in Atlanta back in November, and he came back, and I talked to him for a while, and he said that he was afraid that this technology could put him out of business. But I think even he may have, even attending the event, may have misunderstood the power of this, and how it may not put him out of business. It may make him, he's a 4-person brokerage now. It'll put him on the same playing field, like you said, as these mega companies out here, because they have the ability to access the same information. There's no secret handshakes in the dark anymore. So I think that it could be a good thing for most small companies to get on board with this, so that they understand it and they can use it to their advantage.
No, I agree. I think the message I would have of people worried about, going out of business, or worried about the technology, whether we're talking big companies or small companies, is if you operate a business that is honest and is transparent and is doing what's best for parties, you have nothing to lose in blockchain, because all of that information becomes obvious, right? So if Pete at Tadmor is paying in 90 days, they'll go out of business really quick in an environment where that information is transparent, and Pete is not. So I'm not saying he is. He, from what I understand, he operates, to your point, he's an honest broker, literally an honest broker, and he operates a good quality business, and people respect him for that and are loyal to him for that. He actually has an opportunity to grow his business, because he's able to demonstrate that's who he is and what he stands for, and that puts him on the same playing field as the biggest brokers out there. Because now, when a shipper does business with Tadmor, they can have the confidence that Tadmor has a history of operating fair and transparent to the industry. A broker that is screwing somebody or not paying somebody. You got to remember, you can build this technology where as soon as the driver delivers the load, he gets paid. There is no factoring. It's free. You can actually build that so the moment the truck bumps the dock and the driver's done, that money ends up in their account. I mean, it can be built that way and that fast, and there's no quick pay fee for that. So it's a lot of things, a lot of value to that, and I think that's what we'll see.
And all that stuff is, the value there is phenomenal. We've got several calls on, so I'm just going to blast through these callers. And so I will, and Elizabeth is still screening a few of them. So for 2 of the callers that are on hold, I'm going to bring you on the air. I'm going to get your questions out and let you stay on. And don't be offended if I cut you off before you finish everything, but I'll give you as much time as possible here. So we'll go to Shalom in Florida. Welcome to the show.
Hello, yes, first-time caller. So, I'm here in Orlando, and just to touch on the point, I took an advice, and I went to Cape Canaveral today, and that was an awesome event. What a big boom.
Yeah,
so that was exciting.
It's impressive to see those rockets go
I'm
up.
back in Orlando. So, my little bit story, there are many truckers out there that knows me. I'm the one behind the OIDA trailer with the big green moose in the back. And I, in the last 6 months, took a personal advantage of blockchain in my business. I added that to my business. And what I'm here to say is that this technology is coming. It's great. It's going to benefit everyone in the industry, especially the small guy. I think that the transparency and the verification of every transaction that happens in the industry is a welcome addition. And I think that small business owner, truckers, owner operators, independent contractors, they must pay attention to it. They must understand how it can benefit their business because the big guys are taking advantage of it. This technology is coming our way. There's no way that we will be able to hold freight without absolutely using this kind of technology, in 3, 4, 5 years from now. And I want to just note on one personal experience that I had back in 2010 in the expedite industry. Anybody that ever heard of a company called Selectus, then the first one to adopt this kind of technology are the big guys, and they are the ones that have been able to survive the business, while most owner-operators in the expedite industry that were not able to adapt to the new technology, they have been forced out of the industry at the time. I think that blockchain technology is the way of the future, and it's not in 5 years. It will become much, much sooner. I want to mention that 3 days ago, there was a hearing in an economic committee in Washington, D.C., about how the government is adapting and enforcing this kind of technology. I will be willing to share that link to anyone that is interested to learn about it. I'm also an expert on the issues of how this technology is affecting healthcare. I am taking note. I think that in healthcare, it will have much greater impact than in the trucking industry. And I think that drivers nowadays that may have a problem, a small business owner or asking employees with health services or health premium and healthcare costs, this will dramatically reduce the cost. And I recommend anybody to do the research about that because this kind of technology are available this year. So I welcome all the hard work that is being done behind the scene. I'm hoping to be in Atlanta on May because I think that everybody in the industry must adopt this kind of technology or they will have a very hard time staying in business.
No, I appreciate that. I look forward to meeting you. Hopefully I can get your contact information and we can meet and talk about what your experiences.
And to his point, the technology is coming. I know there are a lot of naysayers that may not appreciate the new technology or don't understand it, but the technology is coming one way or the other, and we have to learn how to embrace it and use it to our advantage. And I think early adopters will have, the whole technology is kind of about leveling the playing field in a way, but those that jump on board early, I think will still have an advantage knowing how to use it to their benefit first. Blow through a couple more calls here. We are getting toward the top of the hour. I'm going to Micasio, I believe, in Arizona. Welcome to the show. How can we help you?
Yeah, there we go. Hey, I was wondering, I came in a little bit late, but what I was wondering is how you're saying that basically this is back in 1990 and you want to kind of set the standard in trucking and overall the whole industry. And what I was wondering in that space, since you said earlier, Beta, we won't buy a product from Beta, but yet you are going to be building the standard of the new industry. What place will Beta have in the future?
Yeah, so Beta.
If we're not able to buy, a product from Beta, or that's where I'm confused.
That's a great question. So you're familiar with OIDA, right?
Say that again.
I don't know if he's on mute. You're familiar with OIDA, OOIDA, or TCA, or TIA. So we're a trade alliance. And so what that means is we are bringing together companies that are in the business, that have a vested interest in the business. They're the ones designing the technology, but it all needs to work together. If you go back to the internet days, when I was when I was a kid, we had this bulletin board you would dial up to on a modem, and they would, it was very slow, and we would dial into our high school or modem, and you could get our grades that way. But it didn't connect to anything beyond that, and that's what blockchain looks like today. Is it's one use case for one company. It doesn't work with anything else. And so one company's doing one thing, another company's doing another thing. It doesn't actually solve problems. It can solve problems for them, but it doesn't help everybody else. And I think as an industry, we have to ask ourselves: are we going to let Silicon Valley come in and take over the industry, or is the industry going to do something about it by actually adopting technology and solving problems? And that's where we're at right now. Is these companies have come together. Think of BITA as a United Nations of sorts, or a WTO, basically bringing entities together to talk about things and solve problems without needing the government to do so. And that's what's happening with BITA. BITA is an alliance, not a company. It is a non-506c, which means it is nonprofit, basically bring companies to talk about how to solve problems. Hello? Hello?
Craig, I can still hear you. Hang on just a second. It sounds like, Kenny, you had
Okay.
a little bit of technical difficulties, so hang on just a moment.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, I think I'm back. We had some microphone issues there.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see. Let me pull my board back up. Okay, we got 2 more calls real quick. We'll knock these out, and we'll wrap things up for the night. We'll go to Stuart in Florida. Stuart, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing this evening? So I want to sort of play devil's advocate here with this with this software and stuff in the system. So you say it's an alliance of carriers that have come together to help solve the issues of the industry. Now, just from doing my research, one of the biggest issues, especially a lot of these bigger carriers and these mega carriers have, is they're actually having to outsource a lot of their freight. But when you're a company that big, your whole objective is to move the freight as cheaply as possible. And my thought on this system is, isn't it just another way for them to exploit the smaller guy? I mean, in my opinion, if these mega carriers have to outsource so much of their freight, I mean, I've seen numbers as high as 40% of their freight. I mean, I'm not saying that's all of them that high, but the leverage is in my hand, and I have the playing field if they have to outsource that much freight. And I mean, a perfect example of where I'm going with this is I was on a load the other day for Coyote, actually, and there was another guy doing exactly the same run. I was getting the same. I mean, I was getting, I think it's like 30% more than what the other guy was getting paid for exactly the same run. And it makes me question is when I hear a lot of these people complain, hey, I don't feel that I'm getting, treated right. It makes me question, well, is it the person that's, negotiating these rates, or, is it this small guy that doesn't know how to negotiate? It might be a great driver, a great guy, but just doesn't know how to, maximize his earnings, when it comes to the negotiation side. And I feel that sometimes, when you have a lot of these organizations that come together, what is their objective? At the end of the day, it comes down to dollars and cents. And if they have to already outsource so much of their freight, what are they trying to achieve from it? I mean, you know, what is their ultimate goal at the end of the day? And I like the idea, you know, of, you know, the whole, you know, we spoke about Convoy earlier. You know, you can bid online and whatever else. I like that. It takes out dealing with a broker. But if I put my bid at what it is, if they don't want to pay me that, I'm not taking it. I'm going to go and negotiate with some of the other brokers I deal with. And I'm sort of struggling to understand the benefit of having this sort of an all in house thing, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? What I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. So great points. None of that goes away. The future does not take away. You know, smart operators are going to be continuing to be smart. They're just going to have a lot more information. So when I say smart operators, people like yourself that are getting paid more should continue to be paid more. It's just that you should be rewarded. You should have more information about what it is that you're taking. So if a broker doesn't want to pay you detention, that's their business, right? But they should disclose it. You should know before you take the load you're not going to get in detention, and you may be there 8 hours. And if you decide that's okay and that's the right load for you, then so be it. There's nothing to say that you can't do it. So when we get into, and the reason, you know, these large carriers outsource so much of their freight is variable capacity. They go into these shippers and they want the shipper they want a single source to them. They want all the freight coming to them, and they just don't have enough trucks to cover. They find that they can buy trucks on the spot market much cheaper than it costs to run their own freight, to run their own trucks, and so that's what they do. And you're right; they are focused on buying. You know, ultimately, a broker's job is really charge the absolute highest price they can get away with without, you know, scaring off the customer, and paying the least amount of money to the driver. That's how you make a lot of money in brokerage. And I'm not passing judgment on that. What I'm saying is, in a transparent market where everybody has information and is armed with information, then the people that use that information can make better decisions. I'm assuming when you negotiate, you're using you know, a price service like DAT or Truckstop to give you some idea of where the market's at.
Oh, correct. And that's sort of, but when you do that, the guys that don't know how to negotiate, and now is this transparency there, what is separating me from them? I mean, my knowledge that I have and my fortitude to be there and hard on my negotiations, you know, and know that, you know, see, this guy's not going to pay detention. And I will ask these questions up front, but, you know, driver B doesn't ask these questions. You know, how is that, you know, from a business standpoint, you know, that guy is running his business into the ground as far as I'm concerned, you know, by not asking these questions. And he probably shouldn't be he probably shouldn't be in that position to where he has to negotiate. So when you make it a level playing field like that, isn't that unfair to the guys which are going to capitalizing on that right now? I mean, it's a free market, right? You know, to negotiate these rates. And I feel that that's being taken away maybe a little bit when you have the transparency, because you get the guy that really isn't strong in that area and is, you know, going straight to the bottom line. And I don't know, I just feel that it's gonna drive them rates down. It's like you use the analogy with the airplane tickets, right? You know, today I'm using the buyer of the airplane ticket as the carrier. When I go and buy an airplane ticket, I'll go and find the cheapest thing I can find, you know? I mean, I'll look to 2 or 3 sites and see what's the cheapest one I can buy, you know, as a consumer. And I feel maybe is that where this is going to go with this in the long run, you know, these big carriers going to look to just drive that price down when you have these guys which don't know how to negotiate, you know, and I just feel that's where that could potentially end up. You know, I mean, I do like the idea of the transparency and being able to see that. It's going to make my life a lot easier. You know, it's a lot of questions I don't have to ask now because I could see that. But I just feel that I feel that there's that opportunity to drive the price down. And if these carriers, these mega carriers, are part of this alliance, if that's their intentions, you know, it's sort of making it easy for them to do that. You know, and it makes it very difficult for the guy which has a good business understanding and good business fortitude, you know?
Yeah, but so right now you can get pricing from DAT, and so can the same driver that you talked about get pricing from DAT as well. They can go. Both parties can get it. The difference is you know how to interpret that information and use it. And the driver that you just talked about, 30% less, either isn't subscribing to a price service or doesn't know how to interpret it. It doesn't change. That doesn't change your ability to negotiate in the future, nor does it change his ability. It just means that people that are using the information and understanding what the information tells them will be smarter about what business they take. So if the guy that takes a load that detains him for 10 hours ends up taking it for $200 less, you're probably better off that you never took that load to begin with, because you would be sitting at a shipper not making any money running, and you would take a load that ended up paying you more. Now, this assumes that the market is strong like it is right now. If the economy collapses and we go to a really crappy economy, then it's going to be a tough environment for everybody. But you, because you have better information, will actually have a more likelihood of surviving than the guy who doesn't. The most important thing in business is to not only have good instincts, which you do by the way you described it, but to have good information on how to interpret those instincts. So the guys that don't have good information are not going to be saved by the technology, or the guys that don't know how to interpret the information. Nothing's going to save them. It's going to force the companies that operate inefficiently and force the companies that are not operating up and up out of business over time, because they won't be able to survive. People know if the company is a quality company, and that information is apparent. It's going to basically make everyone that operates their business efficiently have that information, and the ones that don't will end up struggling over time.
All right, I think that pretty much wraps things up for tonight. Where can they find more information? How about this event that's coming up in May, or how they might want to join or take advantage of this technology?
Yeah, great questions. So you can go to, if you're interested in joining or at least applying to join the alliance, it's bita.studio, STUDIO. And then our event starts on May 21st to 23rd in Atlanta. It coincides with Georgia Tech University. It's not on the campus. It's actually away from campus because it's too big in terms of the amount of people coming. But we'd love to invite anyone there and come learn about the technology. I think you'll find that there's a lot of value in it versus, just because big companies are there does not mean it's a bad outcome. But we'd love to have you. So feel free to reach out and let us know if there's anything we can do.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to elaborate on that a little bit. It's BITA, which is Blockchain in Transport. What is it? Blockchain in Transport Alliance. BITA.studio. That'll take you to the homepage. You'll see the middle of the menu there is events. That's where you can find information about the event in May. There's also right next to that news, which takes you right to FreightWaves. All the news about the blockchain and the whole development will be right under there. Then you have discussion board, education. There's all kinds of information about how this will work and what's coming up, what to look forward to. And I think, attending this in May, joining the association and getting on board now is probably in the best interest of everyone. This technology, like it or not, it's coming. And being on board in the early stages, it'd be equivalent to, having your own website before the internet even goes online. I think that's probably the best analogy right now. Being on board and understanding how it works before it even goes live, so to speak. And, it's really in its infant stages, just forming. It's really, at this point, still just a theory, right? It's still not ready to go, right? So we're really just, if you join now, you have a influence on what happens and how it will affect us all going forward. I think right now is a good time to get in before, none of us could right now change the way the internet works. But right now, getting on board, you could change how this whole technology works going forward. So bita.studio is the homepage there to find more information. And again, right in the middle there of the menu is news. That takes you to FreightWaves. And thank you, Craig, for joining us.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
All right, that wraps things up for the night. Thank you all for joining the show. This has been Trucking with Authority. I've been your host, Kenny Long, although tonight I didn't have to do much hosting. Craig, this was his floor tonight, and there was a lot of great information shared. Fantastic stuff. Blockchain is coming, so let's get on board. Let's understand what the future has to hold. I mean, the future will be technology, and we need to embrace it now. Remember to aim high, dream big, strategize your plan, and getting on board and understanding this technology right now is how you form your strategy. Earn your success, because only you drive you. Have a good night, everybody.